My daughter demanded $14,000 from the son. She abandoned at Thanksgiving dinner, saying, "I'll send you my bank details before the weekend." When he calmly showed her 25 years of secret child support transfers she'd stolen, she went dead silent and didn't touch her food. He didn't say a word. That was 6 months ago. Last week, she deleted every social media account she had. When my daughter Veronica was 18, she got me a gift. It was a pregnancy test with 2 pink lines. I sighed. She had always been more on the impulsive side, the type to never think things through. I couldn't even get a word in before she started shouting, "And I'm not getting rid of it, so y'all better step up." For context, by y'all, she meant me and her father. And by step up, she meant dedicating our lives to raising her baby for her. Well, me and my husband love babies and always wanted to have more children, so we agreed pretty quickly, and soon Veronica was practically shoving forms in our face. She insisted on signing away her parental rights because she didn't want any responsibility in case my parents ran into money problems, as if she had any money to give. Anyway, Marcus ended up being an amazing son. He was curious and kind, never asked without saying please, always offering to help my husband with his work. Unfortunately, he was a dentist and could never take him up on the offer, but the gesture was unbelievably wholesome, and when he turned 10, he started asking about his bio mom, our daughter. It was clear he wanted a relationship with her. Every Mother's Day, he'd write 2 cards and had a stack of envelopes labeled "to mommy" in a box under his bed. Plus, he tried to contact her and asked for a meeting over 12 times when he turned 11 years old. Me and my husband always tried to distract him from this, to reassure him that we loved him as our own, but it wasn't until the 13th time our daughter shut him down that he finally gave up and started living his own life. I did everything I could to make him feel welcomed into our home. Me and my husband both gave up our savings so he could go to college without getting a part-time job. We made sure that he went on holiday at least once a year, with just one of us tagging along with him. By the time he was 22, it seemed like he had forgotten all about his mother. She was still talking to us but never asked about him or tried to have a mother-son relationship. I was always extremely grateful for this, because by this point I loved Marcus more than I could ever love Veronica, and she purposely kept us from her life too. She had us blocked on every social media platform, including WhatsApp. All I knew was that she had married someone new across the country. Good riddance. My son ended up dropping out of college because he and his friends had started a mobile detailing business. His marketing was so good that business soared, and he always gave me and my husband 15% of all his earnings to thank us for being so amazing. There was just one thing I hated about him. He was dead set on paying us back so we could experience what we missed while raising him. It ticked me off a lot because I never wanted him to feel like that, and we enjoyed raising him more than we would have enjoyed doing anything else. A year later, he met the love of his life, Nicole, and she was a sweetheart. Little did I know, his life wasn't going to be all sunshine and rainbows, because as we all sat around the table for Thanksgiving dinner, he got a call. I figured it was a new client, and my face was practically beaming with pride. He even put it on speakerphone, but as soon as he picked up, my heart dropped. It was Veronica. She asked how he was doing, and he kept all the answers short but firm. It was at that moment that I realized he had truly stopped loving her. She asked to meet at a restaurant, and he said he'd think about it before hanging up. "Honey, me and your father can go with you?" I offered, because his eyebrows were furrowed like he was actually considering it. "That would be amazing," he exclaimed, his cheeriness lighting up the entire room. I myself knew she was up to no good. She hadn't tried to establish a relationship in 25 years, and I knew what she was like. When we sat down at the fanciest restaurant in town, she didn't even hug my son or ask how he was doing. "So what's the meal budget for tonight?" was the first thing she blurted. My son just shrugged his shoulders before saying, "Whatever," and she ordered the lobster ravioli with a bottle of white wine. When she caught sight of my son's lock screen, she pounced. "Oh wow, is that your girlfriend? She's beautiful." Her voice sounded so fake that the entire table was quiet for a few seconds before she spoke again. "It reminds me of me and my recently divorced husband. We used to be so cute." I asked her what happened, and she told me she had cheated on him. My son rolled his eyes. Stuff just happens sometimes. "Anyway, I'm really struggling to find a job right now. Do you think you could help me out?" I guess. "Great." What she said next shook me to my core. "I'm going to need around $14,000 to secure an apartment. I'll send you my bank details, so make sure to send the money before the weekend." I expected my son to get angry, but instead he just nodded and waited for the food to arrive. So I opened my mouth to speak and rip her a new one, but then I felt a pinch under the table. It was my son, so I just stayed quiet. That's when I noticed something strange. My son pulled out his phone and showed Veronica a photo. Her face went completely white. "Remember this?" he asked calmly. It was a document. Turns out when Marcus's business took off, he hired a private investigator. What he discovered changed everything. Veronica hadn't just abandoned him. She'd been collecting child support from his biological father this entire time, claiming she was raising Marcus herself. 25 years of fraudulent payments. The document showed years of bank transfers, each one meticulously documented. Veronica's hands trembled as she set down her wine glass. My husband leaned forward, studying our daughter's reaction with the same analytical gaze he used when examining patients. Marcus tucked his phone away and picked up his menu. The casual gesture seemed to unnerve Veronica even more. She opened her mouth, closed it, then tried again. Her fingers drummed against the white tablecloth. The waiter arrived with our appetizers. Veronica barely touched her bruschetta, pushing the tomatoes around with her fork. Marcus ate steadily, occasionally glancing at Nicole, who sat beside him, her hand resting supportively on his knee under the table. After several minutes of silence, Veronica cleared her throat. She straightened her shoulders and attempted a smile that didn't reach her eyes. The transformation was remarkable. From panicked to calculating in seconds, Marcus continued eating, waiting. I recognized this patience from when he was younger, sitting for hours with a fishing rod, never complaining about the wait. My husband caught my eye and gave a subtle nod. We both understood what was happening. Veronica's phone buzzed. She grabbed it eagerly, perhaps hoping for an escape route. Her face fell as she read the message. She set the phone face down and took a large sip of wine. The main courses arrived. Veronica's lobster ravioli sat untouched as she watched Marcus cut into his steak. Nicole made small talk about the restaurant's ambiance, her voice light but her eyes alert. My husband complimented the chef's technique. I sipped my water and observed. Finally, Veronica pushed her plate aside. She folded her napkin precisely, buying time. When she looked up, her expression had shifted to something I remembered from her teenage years, defiance mixed with desperation. Marcus finished chewing, wiped his mouth, and leaned back in his chair. He pulled out his phone again, swiping to another document. This one showed dates, amounts, and a name I recognized. Marcus's biological father. Veronica's jaw tightened. She glanced around the restaurant as if looking for witnesses, then back at Marcus. Her fingers found her wine glass again, gripping the stem until her knuckles whitened. The waiter approached to check on our meals. Veronica waved him away impatiently. Marcus thanked him politely and asked for a dessert menu. His calm demeanor seemed to agitate Veronica further. She suddenly stood, her chair scraping against the floor. Several nearby diners glanced our way. Marcus remained seated, studying the dessert options. Nicole placed her hand on his arm, a gesture of support that Veronica's eyes tracked with interest. Veronica sat back down heavily. immediately. She grabbed her purse, rummaging through it with increasing frustration. Finally, she pulled out her wallet and slapped it on the table. The gesture seemed more defeated than aggressive. Marcus ordered tiramisu for the table. Veronica ordered another glass of wine. My husband and I exchanged concerned glances. Nicole excused herself to the restroom, and Veronica's eyes followed her departure with calculating interest. While Nicole was gone, Veronica leaned across the table. Her voice dropped to a whisper, but Marcus held up his hand. He pointed to his phone, which was recording. Veronica's face flushed. Nicole returned, and the dessert arrived. Marcus offered Veronica a spoonful of tiramisu. She shook her head, her movements sharp and agitated. The wine arrived, and she drank half the glass immediately. My husband finally spoke up, mentioning how nice it was to all be together. Veronica's laugh was bitter. She gestured wildly, nearly knocking over her water glass. I steadied it before it could spill. Marcus pulled out a small notebook from his jacket pocket. He flipped through pages covered in neat handwriting. Dates, times, phone calls, a detailed record of every attempt he'd made to contact Veronica over the years. Veronica's breathing quickened. She pressed her palms flat against the table as if grounding herself. Her eyes darted between the notebook and Marcus's face, searching for something. Weakness, perhaps, or sympathy. The restaurant began to empty as the evening wore on. Our waiter discreetly placed the check on the table. Marcus reached for it, but Veronica snatched it first. She stared at the total, then at Marcus, then back at the check. She fumbled with her credit card, dropping it twice before managing to hand it to the waiter. When he returned, she signed with a shaking hand. The tip line remained blank until Marcus quietly pointed to it. She scribbled a number and pushed the receipt away. We gathered our coats. Veronica struggled with hers until my husband helped her into it. She jerked away from his touch, nearly stumbling. Marcus steadied her elbow and she yanked her arm free. Outside, the November air was crisp. Veronica hugged herself, shivering despite her coat. Marcus offered to call her a ride. She shook her head violently, then seemed to reconsider. Her phone appeared in her hand, but she stared at it without dialing. Nicole suggested we all get coffee to help Veronica sober up. Veronica's eyes narrowed at the younger woman. She took a step toward her, then stopped. Marcus moved slightly, positioning himself between them. The valet brought our cars around. Veronica hadn't driven. She'd taken a taxi to the restaurant. She stood on the sidewalk, swaying slightly, watching as we prepared to leave. Her expression cycled through emotions too quickly to track. Marcus handed her cash for a taxi. She stared at the bills in her palm, then crumpled them in her fist. For a moment, I thought she might throw them back at him. Instead, she shoved them in her pocket. As our car pulled up, Veronica grabbed Marcus's sleeve. Her grip was desperate. He gently removed her hand, holding it briefly before letting go. She stepped back, nearly colliding with a parking meter. We drove home in silence. Marcus followed in his car with Nicole. Through the rear window, I could see them talking animatedly. My husband reached over and squeezed my hand. We both knew this was far from over. At home, we gathered in the kitchen. Marcus made coffee while Nicole set out cookies from the pantry. The familiar routine felt surreal after the evening's tension. My husband loosened his tie and sank into his favorite chair. Marcus's phone buzzed repeatedly. He glanced at it, sighed, and turned it face down. Nicole rubbed his shoulders, and he leaned into her touch. The coffee maker gurgled, filling the silence. When the coffee was ready, we sat around the table. The same table where Marcus had done homework, where we'd celebrated birthdays, where he'd told us about his business plans. Now it hosted a different kind of family meeting. Marcus pulled out his laptop. The screen displayed a folder labeled with Veronica's name. Inside were dozens of files, documents, bank statements, screenshots. The investigation had been thorough. My stomach churned at the implications. He showed us a timeline. 25 years of deposits from his biological father to Veronica. The amounts varied, but were consistent. Meanwhile, receipts showed she'd spent the money on herself. Vacations, shopping, restaurants. Not a penny had gone to Marcus's care. My husband's face darkened as he reviewed the evidence. His dentist's precision extended to his anger. Controlled, measured, but undeniable. He asked to see specific documents, cross-referencing dates with his own memories. Nicole asked practical questions about legal implications. Marcus explained that he'd consulted with an attorney. The statute of limitations complicated things, but the moral weight was clear. Veronica had stolen from both him and his biological father. The front door security system chimed. We all froze. Marcus checked his phone, then showed us the camera feed. Veronica stood on our porch, swaying slightly, pressing the doorbell repeatedly. Marcus stood up from the table, his movements deliberate and calm. He walked to the front door while the rest of us remained seated, watching the security feed on his phone. Through the camera, we could see Veronica leaning against the doorframe, her mascara smudged and her usually perfect hair disheveled. He opened the door just wide enough to speak with her. From where we sat, we could see his back straighten as Veronica gestured wildly, her hands cutting through the air. She pushed past him into the house before he could stop her. She stumbled into our kitchen, her eyes scanning the room until they landed on the laptop. Her face contorted as she lunged for it, but Marcus was faster. He closed the laptop and tucked it under his arm. Veronica's hands grasped at empty air where the computer had been. My husband stood up, placing himself between Veronica and the rest of us. His protective stance reminded me of when the kids were young and he'd shield them from aggressive dogs at the park. Veronica noticed and laughed, the sound harsh and bitter. She pulled out her phone and began typing furiously. Marcus watched her, his expression unreadable. Within minutes, his own phone started buzzing with notifications. He glanced at the screen and his jaw tightened. Nicole leaned over to look, and her eyes widened. Veronica had posted on social media, tagging Marcus's business page. The posts accused him of abandoning his own mother, of being ungrateful after everything she'd sacrificed. She'd even included old photos of herself pregnant, creating a narrative of a struggling young mother. Marcus set his laptop on the counter and pulled out his phone. His fingers moved quickly across the screen as he documented the posts, taking screenshots before she could delete them. Veronica watched him, a satisfied smirk playing at her lips. The doorbell rang again. This time, the security camera showed a man in his 50s, well-dressed but clearly agitated, Marcus's biological father. Veronica's smirk vanished, replaced by panic. She rushed toward the back door, but my husband stepped into her path. Marcus went to answer the door. The man entered, his eyes immediately finding Veronica. His face was a mixture of confusion and anger. He held up his phone, showing bank statements. 25 years of payments, all supposedly for Marcus's care. Veronica backed against the wall, her eyes darting between exits. The man pulled out more documents from his briefcase. Receipts from private investigators, evidence of Veronica's lifestyle, proof that she'd never spent a dime on Marcus. She suddenly grabbed a glass from the counter and threw it against the wall. The crash made everyone jump. In the chaos, she bolted for the front door. Marcus didn't try to stop her. Instead, he calmly picked up the larger pieces of glass while Nicole grabbed the broom. The biological father sank into a chair, his head in his hands. He explained how he'd been paying child support faithfully, believing he was helping raise his son. He'd wanted to be involved, but Veronica had convinced him it would confuse Marcus. He'd trusted her. Over the next hour, he showed us years of correspondence. Emails where Veronica described Marcus's supposed needs, school supplies, medical bills, extracurricular activities, all fabricated. The man had even increased payments when she claimed Marcus needed tutoring or special programs. Marcus listened quietly, occasionally asking questions. His biological father had tried to attend graduations, birthdays, but Veronica always had excuses. Marcus was sick, out of town, or it would be too emotionally difficult. The man had respected what he thought were Marcus's wishes. As they talked, Marcus's phone continued buzzing. Business associates were seeing Veronica's posts. Some sent supportive messages, others asked questions. A few canceled upcoming appointments. Marcus responded to each one professionally, but I could see the tension in his shoulders. Nicole suggested they should post a response, but Marcus shook his head. He had a different plan. He pulled out the folder of evidence and began organizing documents, bank statements, receipts, the signed custody papers, everything that told the real story. His biological father offered to help. Together, they created a timeline showing where the money actually went. Veronica's shopping sprees coinciding with supposed school expenses. Vacation photos posted during times she claimed Marcus was ill and needed medical care. The next morning, Veronica's campaign intensified. She'd created a sob story about being a young mother forced to give up her child, now being rejected by the son she'd always loved from afar. Friends and distant relatives who didn't know the truth began sharing her posts. Marcus's business phone rang constantly. Some clients wanted to show support, others wanted to distance themselves from the drama. He handled each call with grace, explaining briefly that there was more to the story and asking for patience. By afternoon, Veronica had escalated further. She showed up at Marcus's business location, making a scene in the parking lot. His business partner called to warn him. Security footage showed her approaching customers, telling them her version of events. Marcus drove there immediately, with Nicole following in her car. I wanted to go too, but my husband convinced me to stay home. We watched through the security app as Marcus arrived to find Veronica talking to one of his biggest clients. He didn't confront her directly. Instead, he greeted his client warmly and suggested they discuss the service inside. Veronica tried to follow, but the client politely declined her company. She stood in the parking lot, shouting accusations as they walked away. Inside his office, Marcus showed the client a few key documents. Not the entire folder, just enough to demonstrate the truth. The client, a successful businesswoman herself, understood immediately. She even offered to write a testimonial about Marcus's character. Veronica waited outside for 2 hours. Every time a customer arrived, she'd approach them. Some listened politely, others brushed past her. Marcus's partner started keeping a log of the incidents, documenting everything in case they needed it later. That evening, Veronica tried a different approach. She called my husband's dental practice, speaking to the receptionist about a family emergency. When that didn't work, she showed up at the office just before closing time. My husband found her in the waiting room, telling patients that he'd stolen her son. The other dentist in the practice asked her to leave. She refused. They had to threaten to call security before she finally left, but not before taking photos of the office. Those photos appeared online within an hour, with captions suggesting we'd built our comfortable life using money meant for Marcus. She implied the dental practice was bought with funds that should have gone to her for raising him. Marcus's biological father saw the posts and called immediately. He was furious. He'd kept every receipt, every bank statement, every piece of correspondence. He offered to make a public statement, but Marcus asked him to wait. The next day brought new challenges. Veronica had found Nicole's workplace and left messages with the receptionist. Nothing threatening, just enough to be disruptive. Nicole's boss was understanding but concerned about the situation escalating. Marcus decided it was time to be proactive. He created a simple website with the timeline he and his biological father had compiled. No accusations, just facts, dates, amounts, and documents. He didn't share it publicly yet, just kept it ready. Veronica must have sensed things weren't going her way. She called Marcus repeatedly from different numbers. When he didn't answer, she left voicemails. They started pleading, then angry, then threatening to ruin his business completely. She followed through on that threat the next morning. She created fake review accounts and bombarded his business page with 1-star ratings. Each review told a different version of her abandonment story. Marcus documented each one, reporting them to the platform. His business partner suggested they hire a lawyer, but Marcus wanted to handle it within the family first. He believed Veronica would burn herself out. I wasn't so sure, watching the toll it was taking on him and Nicole. That afternoon, Veronica showed up at our house again. This time she brought 2 friends who believed her story. They stood on our lawn, Veronica crying dramatically while her friends comforted her. Neighbors started to notice. My husband went outside to ask them to leave. Veronica's friends accused him of heartlessness, of stealing a baby from a teenage mother. He remained calm, simply stating this was a private family matter and asking them to respect our property. One neighbor, who'd known us since Marcus was young, came over. She told Veronica's friends a few truths about who had really raised Marcus, who had attended every school event, every doctor's appointment. Veronica's friends began to look uncomfortable. As they argued on our lawn, Marcus was across town meeting with his biological father again. They decided to contact the bank about the fraudulent child support claims, not to press charges, but to get official documentation of where the money had gone. The bank manager was helpful once they explained the situation. While they couldn't release all records without a court order, they could confirm that the accounts receiving child support were solely in Veronica's name, never joint with Marcus or us. Meanwhile, Nicole faced her own challenges. Veronica had found her social media profiles and began commenting on old photos, suggesting Nicole was only with Marcus for his money. Nicole's friends rallied to her defense, but the stress was visible. That evening, we all gathered again at our house. Marcus looked exhausted. His business had lost 3 clients, though others had actually increased their bookings to show support. Nicole held his hand as he reviewed the damage to his reputation. My husband suggested we consider a restraining order, but Marcus still hesitated. Despite everything, she was still his biological mother. He wanted to believe she'd realize her mistakes and stop. I knew better, but kept my doubts to myself. The next morning proved me right. Veronica had spent the night creating a crowdfunding page, claiming she needed money to fight for her son's love. She'd used photos from Marcus's childhood, photos she must have gotten from relatives since she'd never taken any herself. Marcus's biological father saw the page first and called immediately. He was beyond furious now. She was literally trying to profit from the situation she'd created. He wanted to expose everything publicly, but Marcus asked for more time. Instead, Marcus focused on damage control. He personally called each client who'd canceled, explaining briefly that there was a family situation being resolved. Most were understanding. 2 even rebooked their appointments after hearing his professional response. Veronica's crowdfunding gained little traction. People who knew our family questioned her story in the comments. She responded to each one with increasingly wild accusations. The desperation in her posts became more apparent with each update. Then she made a crucial mistake. In one of her responses, she mentioned specific amounts of child support she'd received. The numbers didn't match her sob story of poverty. People began asking questions about where that money had gone if she wasn't raising Marcus. Marcus's biological father seized on this inconsistency. He created his own social media account and posted a simple statement. He confirmed he'd paid child support for 25 years, believing it was going to his son's care. He asked one question: where did that money go? Veronica's response response was swift and vicious. She accused him of abandoning her, of forcing her to give up Marcus, but she couldn't explain the money. Her friends began distancing themselves as the holes in her story became impossible to ignore. In desperation, she tried one more tactic. She contacted a local blogger who covered human interest stories, spinning her tale of a mother separated from her son by cruel grandparents. The blogger, however, was thorough. She reached out to Marcus for his side. Marcus provided the blogger with select documents. Not everything, just enough to show the truth. The custody papers Veronica had insisted on signing, the evidence that we'd raised Marcus entirely on our own. The blogger decided not to run the story. Veronica's options were running out. Her social media campaign had backfired. The crowdfunding page was flagged for suspicious activity. Her friends had stopped returning her calls, but she wasn't done yet. She began showing up at places she knew we'd be. The grocery store, the bank, our favorite restaurant, never approaching directly, just watching from a distance, making sure we knew she was there. The stress was affecting all of us. Marcus's business partner finally put his foot down. He installed additional security cameras and hired a part-time security guard for busy days. It seemed excessive for a mobile detailing business, but the peace of mind was worth it. One afternoon, while Marcus was detailing a car at a client's home, Veronica appeared. She didn't make a scene this time. She just stood on the public sidewalk watching him work. The client noticed and asked if everything was okay. Marcus handled it professionally, explaining it was a family matter being resolved, but I could see the strain when he came home that night. Nicole suggested they take a weekend trip to decompress, but Marcus didn't want to leave his business during this chaos. His biological father had been doing his own investigation. He discovered Veronica had told him Marcus was living with her until age 18, collecting support the entire time. He had receipts for supposed expenses, school uniforms for schools Marcus never attended, medical bills for conditions he never had. The evidence was overwhelming, but Marcus still wanted to handle it privately. He asked his biological father to meet with Veronica one more time, to give her a chance to admit the truth and work out a resolution. I thought he was being too generous. The meeting was set for the following week at a neutral location, a coffee shop downtown. Marcus would be there, along with his biological father, me, and my husband. Nicole offered to come, but Marcus wanted to keep it small. In the days leading up to the meeting, Veronica's behavior became increasingly erratic. She created new social media accounts as fast as the platforms shut down her old ones. Each post was more desperate than the last. She even tried contacting Marcus's employees, the young people he'd hired to help with the business. Most ignored her, but one mentioned she'd offered him money for information about Marcus's schedule. Marcus gave the employee a raise for his loyalty. The night before the meeting, none of us slept well. Marcus spent hours organizing documents, preparing for different scenarios. Nicole stayed with him, offering quiet support. My husband and I lay awake discussing what might happen. The morning arrived gray and drizzly, matching our moods. We arrived at the coffee shop early, choosing a corner table for privacy. Marcus's biological father was already there, looking tired but determined. We ordered coffee and waited. Veronica arrived 20 minutes late, dressed impeccably as always. She'd clearly prepared for this meeting too. She sat down without greeting anyone, her posture rigid and defensive. The conversation that followed would determine everything. Veronica pulled out a folder of her own, placing it on the table between us. Her hands moved with practiced precision as she extracted documents, bank statements showing her current financial situation, eviction notices, job rejection emails. She arranged them like evidence in a courtroom. Marcus studied each document without touching them. His biological father leaned forward, examining the papers with obvious skepticism. My husband maintained his professional demeanor, though I noticed his jaw tightening with each new revelation. The coffee shop buzzed with morning activity around us. Veronica kept glancing at other patrons, perhaps hoping for witnesses to her performance. She dabbed at her eyes with a napkin, though no tears appeared. Her movements were theatrical, calculated. Marcus pulled out his phone and began taking photos of her documents. Veronica's hand shot out to stop him, but he'd already captured what he needed. She withdrew her hand slowly, fingers curling into a fist on the table. His biological father spoke quietly to Marcus, pointing out inconsistencies in Veronica's financial records. The dates didn't align with her claims of poverty. Purchases at high-end stores appeared days after supposed eviction notices. Marcus nodded, adding notes to his phone. Veronica's composure began cracking. She rearranged her documents repeatedly, shuffling them like playing cards. Her breathing became shallow and rapid. The carefully applied makeup couldn't hide the panic spreading across her features. Nicole arrived unexpectedly, having taken time off work. She slid into the booth beside Marcus, her presence clearly unsettling Veronica further. The younger woman's calm confidence contrasted sharply with Veronica's increasing agitation. Marcus showed Nicole the documents on his phone. She studied them carefully, occasionally whispering observations. Veronica watched this exchange with growing desperation, her fingers drumming an erratic rhythm on the table. The biological father pulled out his own documentation, 25 years of canceled checks, bank transfers, and correspondence. He spread them across the table methodically, creating a timeline that contradicted everything Veronica had claimed. Veronica's face flushed as she saw the evidence laid bare. She pushed back from the table, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. Several customers glanced over at the disturbance. She remained standing, swaying slightly, gripping the table edge. Marcus remained seated, organizing the documents into neat piles. His movements were deliberate, unhurried. Each paper found its proper place in the growing evidence collection. Veronica watched helplessly as her fabrications unraveled before her eyes. My husband suggested they move to a more private location. Veronica shook her head violently, insisting the public setting protected her. From what? She didn't specify. Her paranoia was becoming more apparent with each passing moment. The coffee shop manager approached, concerned about the disturbance. Marcus apologized professionally, assuring him they would conclude their business quietly. The manager retreated but kept watching from behind the counter. Veronica suddenly grabbed her purse and headed for the restroom. Nicole followed at a discreet distance. Through the window, I saw Veronica on her phone in the parking lot, gesticulating wildly as she spoke. Marcus used the break to consolidate the evidence with his biological father. They created a comprehensive timeline showing every payment, every lie, every misappropriation of funds. The picture it painted was damning. When Veronica returned, her demeanor had shifted again. She'd reapplied her makeup and straightened her clothes. A new strategy was forming behind her eyes. She sat down with exaggerated grace, folding her hands primly. She began describing elaborate medical conditions she claimed to have developed from the stress of giving up Marcus. Chronic pain, anxiety disorders, depression requiring expensive treatments. Each ailment conveniently emerged when child support payments increased. Marcus cross-referenced her claims with the timeline. Her supposed medical crises coincided perfectly with luxury purchases and vacations. His biological father's face darkened as he recognized the pattern of manipulation. Veronica's stories became increasingly elaborate. She claimed experimental treatments, specialists in other states, alternative therapies not covered by insurance. The costs she quoted were astronomical, designed to justify every penny she'd taken. Nicole pulled up Veronica's old social media posts on her tablet. Photos from the exact dates of these these supposed medical crises showed Veronica at resorts, parties, and shopping sprees. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. Veronica's carefully constructed narrative crumbled. She tried explaining away each photo, each timestamp, each contradiction. Her explanations became more frantic and less coherent. Sweat beaded on her forehead despite the cool morning air. Marcus's biological father had heard enough. He gathered his documents and stood to leave. Veronica grabbed his sleeve, her nails digging into the fabric. He gently but firmly removed her hand and stepped away. The desperation in Veronica's eyes was genuine now. She turned to Marcus, reaching across the table. He pulled back, maintaining distance. Her hands grasped at empty air before falling to the table. She tried one final gambit, claiming she'd been protecting Marcus from his biological father's criminal past. The accusation was so absurd that even nearby customers turned to stare. The man's reputation as a respected accountant made her claims laughable. Marcus's biological father produced documentation of his background checks, professional certifications, and community service records. He'd anticipated this move and came prepared. Veronica's last desperate attempt at manipulation failed spectacularly. The meeting had reached its conclusion. Marcus packed away the evidence carefully. Each document would be needed for what came next. Veronica watched him work, her schemes exhausted, her options depleted. As we prepared to leave, Veronica made one last plea. She promised to disappear, to never contact Marcus again if he'd just help her this once. The offer revealed her true priorities: money over any relationship with her son. Marcus stood without responding. His biological father placed a hand on his shoulder, a gesture of support Veronica had never offered. The contrast between the two parents couldn't have been starker. Outside, Veronica followed us to the parking lot. Her designer heels clicked against the asphalt as she struggled to keep pace. She called out promises, threats, and pleas in equal measure. We continued walking. At our cars, she positioned herself to block Marcus's door. He waited patiently for her to move. When she didn't, he simply walked to the passenger side and entered there. The simple act of avoidance spoke volumes. Veronica pounded on his window as Nicole started the engine. Her carefully styled hair came loose, her makeup smeared with genuine tears now. The facade had completely crumbled, revealing the desperate woman beneath. As they drove away, I saw Veronica sink to her knees in the parking lot. My husband helped her to her feet, ever the professional. She pushed him away and stumbled to her own car, her exit as dramatic as everything else about her. The next few days brought blessed quiet. No social media posts, no surprise visits, no harassing phone calls. We later learned why. Veronica had been busy trying to cover her tracks, deleting old posts and closing accounts. But Marcus and his biological father had already preserved everything. Screenshots, archived pages, downloaded bank statements, 25 years of fraud meticulously documented and safely stored in multiple locations. Marcus's business began recovering immediately. Clients who'd canceled started rebooking. New customers appeared, drawn by word of mouth about his professionalism during the crisis. His handling of the situation had actually improved his reputation. His biological father took decisive action. He contacted every institution that had processed child support payments, not to pursue criminal charges, but to ensure no future payments would be made. The financial pipeline Veronica had exploited was permanently closed. Veronica made one final attempt at manipulation. She appeared at Marcus's business location with an older woman she claimed was her therapist. The woman seemed confused, clearly not understanding her role in Veronica's latest scheme. Marcus's business partner handled the situation brilliantly. He offered them water and chairs in the waiting area, then continued with normal operations. Veronica sat there for 3 hours, her therapist growing increasingly uncomfortable. Eventually, the older woman left, muttering about missed appointments. Veronica remained, stubbornly waiting for Marcus to acknowledge her presence. He continued working, serving customers, and managing his team without a glance in her direction. As closing time approached, the security guard politely informed Veronica the business was closing. She gathered her things slowly, hoping for last-minute intervention. None came. She left with her head high but her scheme in ruins. That night, Marcus's biological father called with news. He'd calculated the total amount taken over 25 years. The sum was staggering, but he decided against legal action. The public humiliation and loss of her con game would have to be punishment enough. Marcus agreed with the decision. He wanted to move forward, not backward. The energy required for legal battles would be better spent on his business and relationship. Nicole supported him completely, her steady presence a stark contrast to Veronica's chaos. We learned Veronica had left town shortly after. Her landlord confirmed she'd abandoned her apartment, leaving behind designer clothes and expensive furniture. Where she went, none of us knew or cared to investigate. Marcus's biological father became a regular presence in our lives. Not intrusive, but available. He attended family dinners and celebrated business milestones. The relationship Veronica had prevented for 25 years finally had space to develop. The business thrived without the constant disruptions. Marcus expanded his service area and hired additional employees. His reputation for quality work and professional integrity attracted increasingly affluent clients. Nicole and Marcus grew closer through the ordeal. Their relationship, tested by Veronica's manipulations, emerged stronger. They began making plans for their future together. Plans that didn't include space for toxic people. My husband and I found peace in the resolution. The daughter we'd lost to selfishness and greed was gone, but the son we'd raised with love remained. Our family was smaller but healthier for the changes. Marcus continued his tradition of sharing business profits with us, though we'd established a college fund for future grandchildren instead. He'd learned the importance of family from us, and we knew he'd pass those values forward. The last we heard of Veronica came through distant relatives. She'd tried similar schemes in other cities, each attempt less successful than the last. Her reputation preceded her now, the internet preserving her history of deception. Marcus kept the evidence folder, not from paranoia, but as a reminder. A reminder of how far someone could fall when they chose manipulation over genuine connection. It gathered dust in a filing cabinet, hopefully never to be needed again. Our family dinners resumed their peaceful rhythm. Marcus and Nicole became engaged on a quiet evening at home, surrounded by the people who truly raised and supported him. The proposal was simple, genuine, everything Veronica's dramatic gestures had never been. Life settled into new patterns. Marcus's business became a local success story. His biological father found the son he'd been denied. Nicole found a partner who understood the value of real family connections. We found our reward in watching Marcus build the life we'd always hoped he'd have, not despite his origins, but because of how he'd chosen to handle them. He'd faced manipulation with integrity and emerged whole. The empty space at our table where Veronica might have sat was filled with laughter, love, and chosen family. Marcus had learned that blood alone doesn't make family. Choice, commitment, and genuine care do. Our story became one of quiet triumph over toxic manipulation. No headlines, no drama, just a young man who refused to let his biological mother's schemes define his life. He'd chosen love over money, integrity over easy solutions. In the end, Veronica got exactly what she'd always wanted, to be free of responsibility. And we got what we'd always wanted, a son who understood that real family shows up, stays present, and loves without conditions or manipulation.